Thank you for this amazing award. I'd like to start out by recognizing my cheering section, my wife Sheila, daughter Erin, my son Brian, and our niece Katie Owen. Being asked to give a speech before a room like this is a little daunting for somebody who's spent their life behind a camera, so I thought I'd use some visual aids. Please, bear with me. When I first heard about winning the award, it was like a scene from a movie.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Let me start at the beginning. All right, I'm not really going to show you all of my baby pictures, but the very fact that this picture exists serves notice to the importance of pictures in my family. My dad, that's him holding me there, introduced me to photography. He had a darkroom tucked away under the basement stairs. The first time I saw an image magically materialize out of the soup, I was hooked. We had Family of Man on the bookshelf. When Ansel Adams visited the college where Dad worked, Dad was his guide, and he made sure I got to spend time with the master. My father's no longer with us, but he believed people live on through the people who love them. If Dad were still alive, he'd get a real kick out of this evening. That's why I'd like to dedicate it to him. I'll tell you, winning something like this forces you to look back over your life. For the last 11 years, I've helped run the Advanced Team Storytelling Workshop. One of the main ideas that we teach at the workshop is to develop a focus statement before you go out and tackle a project. It's a simple, declarative sentence that sums up the essence of the story or the project. I got to wondering if I could come up with a focus statement for my life. My focus statement turned out to be something else I learned at the workshop. The problem is the solution. Now, understand, it's only in retrospect that I realize I've been living my life as if the problem was the solution. Let me give you a couple examples. In college, I majored in political science, but I had a problem. During finals, I got hooked on The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. I'd study for an hour, then I'd read another chapter of The Hobbit, study an hour, and return to the fantasy world. Well, thinking that I might get a decent grade with those kinds of study habits was indeed a fantasy. Sure enough, I flunked political science, and that left me with a much bigger problem. I'm sure many young people have faced this one. After some soul searching, I decided to study the one thing I really like. Major in photography. That wasn't an easy prospect at Earlham, the school I was attending. They had one course in photography and one course in journalism. But I talked them into letting me set up an independent major. I remember my mom telling me through her tears. Any of you ever hear that one? This is my diploma. I show it to you because to this day, it is the only degree in photographic journalism Earlham College has ever awarded. Let me give you another example of the problem is the solution. In high school, I saw a film that changed my life, Blow Up. I'm sure many of you have seen it or at least heard about it. David Hemming is a photographer. He drives around London in a Rolls Royce and shoots orgasmic photos of beautiful women. It looked like a pretty good life to me. So, during college, when I got a chance to study in London, I jumped at it. I shadowed a fashion photographer at the world's largest advertising agency. Just like the movie, the models were beautiful. Everything was going great until they took a break. I then spent an hour listening to them talk about their makeup, their hair, their makeup, their fingernails, I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life around people like that. So I was back to that same old problem. After some soul searching, I decided I needed to sharpen my focus. The solution was to become a photojournalist. Now, I thought I was going to be a still photographer, but the first time somebody put a video camera in my hands, I was hooked with the moving pictures and sound. Before long, I got my first NPPA membership card. I thought it would get me into rock concerts for free. In the early days of my involvement with the NPPA, I was the problem. I bitched about the lack of TV people on the Flying Short course. I bitched about the lack of TV stories in News Photographer magazine. I bitched about the lack of TV members on the board of directors. Finally, somebody took me aside and suggested I quit bitching and start trying to change things. One thing led to another, and I was elected to the board. Now, this was an interesting time for the organization. At one point, I came home from the Albuquerque board meeting so frustrated that I told my wife, Sheila, that's it. I've spent enough time with this organization. It's time to move on and do something else. That's when Clyde Mueller called and asked me to run for vice president. Well, again, one thing led to another, and at the 50th anniversary, I was elected president. This was a memorable convention, held at the Hyatt Regency in Washington, D.C. We invited all of the past still and TV photographers of the year, as well as all the living photojournalism Pulitzer winners. As the newly elected president, it fell to me to introduce these dignitaries at a dinner of close to 500 people. Now, I'm a TV guy. I have great respect for still photographers. I've studied the work of many of the masters, but I've only met a few of them. I'd meant to spend the hour before dinner going over pronunciations, but like I said, these were interesting times. I ended up spending that hour refereeing a cat fight between a couple board members. When it came time for me to introduce the dignitaries, I was woefully ill-prepared, and I butchered many of the names. Names like Heinz Klutmeyer, Neil Ulevish, Jack Dykinga. I've always wanted a do-over, so I want to thank you for giving me a chance tonight to kind of make amends to those guys. As you may imagine, that was the longest, most embarrassing 15 minutes of my life. So, as I approached the end of the list, I was relieved to see that the last name was an easy one. I took a sigh of relief and introduced Edie Adams. The room erupted in laughter. Everyone was laughing, except the godfather of photojournalism, Eddie Adams. This haunted me throughout my presidency. As I handed the presidential gavel to incoming President Jim McNay, he offered me a little reminder, a card with Edie on one side and Eddie on the other. Now, Eddie had the last laugh. That year, the NPPA had published a series of iconic photographs. Many of the photographers who'd taken these images were present. After dinner, I was busy with meetings, so I asked Sheila to take around my posters and get people to sign them. I had this vision of hanging all these signed images on a wall in my house, kind of like this. When Sheila got to Eddie, she told him who she was and apologized again for me being such an idiot. Eddie said he didn't hold any grudges and he would be glad to sign the poster. And he did. To Sheila. As a matter of fact, most of the posters are signed that way. Let me wrap things up with one more example of the problem is the solution. For me, the best part about being president of the NPPA was becoming past president of the NPPA, because then I actually got to do some of the things I dreamed of when I was president. For example, we knew the NPPA did a good job with educational programs for people starting out in the business, but we didn't offer much for experienced photojournalists. After my term ended, John Premack called me up and offered me a chance to develop a Black Ops advanced workshop. John was running the very successful news video workshop at the University of Oklahoma. His workshop was big enough and successful enough that we thought we could hide a workshop and develop it under his umbrella. We called it the Advanced Team Storytelling Workshop. We figured once we had it up and running and actually showing a profit, we'd tell the board about it and ask for their blessing, which is exactly what we did. As part of our evolution, we moved the workshop from Oklahoma to the University of Kentucky, kind of a chance to develop our own identity. For the past few months, we've been searching for a new home, and tonight, I'm pleased to announce that we are moving the workshop to Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. For the faculty, I wanted the best photographers and reporters in the business. But just as importantly, they needed to be able to share what they knew. During our 11 years, we've had some amazing faculty members, but I consider 3 to be the founding fathers. Fred Shook, he's the guy who introduced me to this idea of a focus statement. Fellow Sprague recipient and 3 times NPPA TV Photographer of the Year, John Goheen. And Boyd Huppert, 3-time winner of NPPA's Photojournalism Reporting Award. Now, it may seem strange, but I want to close by showing some of the students' work. Because now, what most excites me is creating an environment where people can be energized and realize their potential. I've told you that we spend a lot of time at the workshop talking about focus. A couple years ago, a team had an idea of doing something about all the phone poles around UK. They'd noticed layer upon layers of signs stapled to these poles. We told them that's an interesting observation, but it's not a story. They worked on the idea, what we call slicing the focus. They asked themselves, what's most interesting? What's most memorable and unique about that observation? Finally, they came up with this focus statement. If this sign pole could talk.
Most people don't pay much attention to a telephone pole.
I guess after a while you start tuning them out.
But what if
It's just a form of communication.
a telephone pole could talk?
Located in the corner of West Vine.
Research opportunity for opiate users.
Just imagine the kind of stories it would tell.
Investors, 10:30 p.m., all ages.
You'll find sheets of paper,
Layers.
some barely holding on,
Yeah, people come by, put them up, tear them down.
put here by those hoping someone would simply stop, look, and listen.
Missing on December 1st, 2005, Christina L. Huff,
For this mother,
14 years of age.
it's a
Dark
story
brown, curly
of desperation.
hair, brown eyes, 5'2". I was desperate to take and find my daughter, very much. And to have it on them poles, yes, that was pretty desperate, just like anybody else would be desperate to find their animal or, anything, lost or found. So yes, I was pretty desperate.
One by one,
Anywhere from the north end to the south end.
a total of 50 flyers in all.
That's one of the reasons, for the telephone pole.
Donna Huff believes words on a sheet of paper
If you have seen,
can speak louder
if
than
you have
words
any
from her own
information,
lips.
please call. They'd be driving by or walking by and they see him. That's the first thing that would catch somebody's eye.
But her plea for help
No, nobody ever called.
went ignored. Just like so many other stories,
Fast Electro, $1 drafts, $2.
you can hear
Prescription opiates for
only if you stop to read what's posted
research study.
on a pole.
It's called the Center for
We were blown away by that story. I now show it as part of my kickoff Focus on Focus session at the workshop. I note that this is a pretty tough story to top. This year, A crew from Denmark decided to give it a try. They started working on it on the first day. The faculty cautioned them. Their idea had a pretty tough degree of difficulty. But they weren't dissuaded. All week they worked on it, and sure enough, they ran into one wall after another. But they used the idea, the problem is the solution. On the final day, this is the story they showed us. The focus statement was, missing. What happened to Christina?
This is an everyday thing everywhere in the U.S. Every day, kids disappear. Every year, 800,000 juveniles are reported missing.
These are flyers that came off of the National Center Missing and Exploited Children website of juveniles that are missing, now listed as missing.
Behind every one of these posters is a story like Christina Huff's.
Missing on December 1st, 2005, Christina L. Huff.
3 years ago, at the age of only 14, she disappeared from her home in Lexington. NPPA told the story, talking to her mom.
Pretty desperate.
But what really happened? Was she found, or did she disappear for good?
This is Sergeant Williams with the police department.
That's what we will try to find out today.
In this case,
And Paul Williams, head of homicide, might be able to help us.
I could probably try to locate the mother and see if the mother's willing to talk. There she is.
she's living here in town?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So you have to, get in on this side.
Detective Martin Shearer insists on giving us an escort. He knows the neighborhood we are going to very well.
There's a lot of good people that live out there, but there's also an element of people that are dealing drugs and carrying handguns and things of that nature. Does she live in 51?
We are told Christina's mom will be home shortly, and here she comes.
Hi, I'm Dennis. I'm a journalist from Denmark.
She tells us that Christina was found by police 2.5 days after she disappeared.
When that cop told me that she was fine, it was like, whew, okay.
But Christina didn't go by herself.
When everything came back, this guy basically, at her being 14, took a teenager with a child like mine and brainwashed her. Mm-hmm. Told her everything that a young girl would want to hear.
Christina met the man, aged 38, at the home of some friends.
It was very, very shocking.
This is Christina, now age 17. She explains that they were living at a Salvation Army shelter at the time she took off. She simply had enough.
Because I was always stuck right there, next to Mom. I really couldn't go nowhere. The only places I was able to really go was school and back.
Now she's regretting the days on the run with a stranger. And listen, this is why.
He raped her twice, and he didn't even tell her, didn't even use protection, didn't tell her that he had been AIDS for 7 years.
Christina didn't get infected, and the man was later convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. But life will never be quite the same for Christina and her mom.
I wish I can turn back the hands of time. I think that a lot. Because, a lot of things could probably be changed.
Even in this dark story, there is a light. Christina came home. Many of those missing kids never do. They keep on being just another poster at the wall.
I feel like the proud parent who takes satisfaction from the accomplishments of their children. Today, I measure my life in the accomplishments of the people that it's been my joy to work with. I think that's something my pop would be proud of. I am truly honored and humbled to be joining such a distinguished group. And I thank you very much.